I was dying on my living room rug. That isn't a figure of speech. My chest had turned into a stone wall, and my lungs were fighting a losing battle to push air through a straw. If you have never had a severe asthma attack, you cannot understand the panic. It is not just about needing air. It is the feeling of your own body turning against you, squeezing the life out of you from the inside. And just when they thought they had gotten away with it, the video revealed a detail that shattered their perfect family life forever. I clawed at the fibers of the expensive Persian carpet my husband, Tom, had bought for our 40th anniversary. My fingernails scraped against the wool. I needed my inhaler. It was right there on the coffee table, maybe 3 feet away. But when you cannot breathe, 3 feet might as well be 3 miles. My vision was starting to spot with black dots. I wheezed, a horrible, high-pitched sound that embarrassed me even as I suffocated. I dragged myself forward, inch by inch. My hand shook as I reached up, my fingers brushing the cold wood of the table leg. I just needed to pull myself up, just a little. Then, a hand appeared in my blurry vision. It was a manicured hand, pale pink nail polish, a diamond ring that I had paid for. Kay, my daughter-in-law, picked up the blue inhaler. Relief washed over me so strong it almost made me dizzy. Thank God. She was going to hand it to me. She was going to save me. I looked up at her, my mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock, waiting for the plastic mouthpiece to touch my lips. But she didn't lower her hand. She stood there, towering over me. She was wearing her tennis whites, looking so clean and crisp, while I was a breathless, sweating mess on the floor. She turned the inhaler over in her fingers, examining it like it was a curiosity, something she had found at a garage sale. Please, I tried to say, but no sound came out, only a ragged, wet whistle. Kay smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were flat and cold, like a shark's. You're making so much noise, Nancy, she said. Her voice was calm, conversational. It's really dramatic. Do you have to be so loud? I reached out, grabbing the hem of her skirt. I was begging. I have never begged for anything in my life, but I begged then. My lungs were burning. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. She took a step back, pulling her skirt from my grip. She held the inhaler up, just a few inches higher, just out of my reach. Roy, she called out. My heart leaped. Roy, my son, my beautiful boy. He was here. He would stop this. He would see his mother on the floor, and he would rush over. He would grab the medicine from her and help me sit up. He would yell at her. Roy, come look at your mother, Kay said, her voice dripping with mock concern. I turned my head. It took every ounce of strength I had. Roy was standing in the doorway to the kitchen. He was holding his phone, scrolling with his thumb. He looked up. He saw me. He saw me clutching my throat. He saw his wife holding my lifeline above her head like a toy. Our eyes locked. For 1 second, I saw recognition. He knew what was happening. He knew I was in trouble. Then he looked at Kay. She didn't say anything to him. She just raised an eyebrow. A silent command. Roy looked back at his phone. He turned his shoulder, blocking me from his view. He walked back into the kitchen. I'm going to grab a soda, he mumbled. The sound of the refrigerator door opening and closing felt louder than a gunshot. He left me. He actually left me. The shock hurt more than the lack of air. My own son, the boy I had nursed through fevers, the boy I had driven to soccer practice, the boy I had helped buy this very house. He saw me dying, and he chose a soda. I looked back at Kay. She was enjoying this. She wasn't just being mean. She was feeding on it. She leaned down, bringing her face close to mine. I could smell her expensive perfume. It smelled like vanilla and rot. She whispered, "Gasp, loser." It was such a childish word. A word a high school bully uses. But coming from a grown woman, watching her mother-in-law suffocate, it was the most terrifying thing I had ever heard. It meant she didn't see me as a person. She didn't see me as a mother. I was just a nuisance. A loser who couldn't even breathe, right? The black spots in my vision were taking over now. The room was spinning. I fell back onto the rug, my strength gone. I stared up at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above me, round and round, like the cycle of abuse I had ignored for years. I was going to die here, on this rug, and they would tell everyone it was a tragedy. Poor Nancy. Her asthma finally got her. We tried to help, but we were too late. They would cry at my funeral. Kay would wear black and hold Roy's hand, and everyone would comfort them. I turned my head to the side, my cheek pressing against the wool. My line of sight drifted to the built-in bookshelves next to the fireplace. Tom loved those shelves. He filled them with books he never read and accolades from his career. And there, nestled between a leather-bound history of the Civil War and a ceramic vase, was a small black box. It had a tiny red light. Blink, blink, blink. The security camera. Tom had installed them months ago. He was paranoid about break-ins after the neighbors got robbed. He had put them in the living room, the hallway, and the front porch. Kay had hated them. She complained they were ugly, that she didn't like being watched. Tom had promised to take them down, but he never got around to it. He just stopped talking about them. The little red light was steady. It was recording. It saw me. It saw Kay. It saw the inhaler in her hand. It saw Roy turn his back. A strange sensation washed over me. It wasn't air, but it was something like it. Clarity. I couldn't die. If I died now, they won. If I died now, that video would be deleted, and the lie would become the truth. I forced myself to stop panicking. Panic uses oxygen. I needed to conserve. I closed my eyes and focused on the tiniest sliver of air entering my nose. Small breaths. Shallow. Don't fight the obstruction. Flow around it. I lay still. Very still. Oh, look at her, Kay said, standing straight again. She sounded bored now. She stopped flopping around. I think the drama is over. She tossed the inhaler. It hit the carpet near my head with a soft thud. Come on, Roy, she yelled toward the kitchen. Let's go out on the patio. The air in here is stale. I heard her footsteps fade. I heard the sliding glass door open and close. I was alone. I waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. My chest still felt like it was wrapped in iron bands, but the inhaler was there. I reached out. My fingers closed around the blue plastic. I brought it to my lips. I pressed the canister. The mist hit the back of my throat. I held it in, counting to 10 in my head. 1, 2, 3. I exhaled. I took another puff. Slowly, painfully, the iron bands began to loosen. The air trickled back in. My vision cleared. I lay there for a long time, just breathing, listening to the silence of the house. This house that I kept clean. This house that I paid the taxes on. This house where I was currently lying on the floor like a piece of discarded trash. I pushed myself up to a sitting position. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. From rage. I looked at the bookshelf again. The red light blinked at me. A silent witness. They thought I was weak. They thought I was a loser. They thought I was just an old woman who would fade away quietly, grateful for whatever scraps of attention they threw at me. Kay had called me a loser. I took a deep breath. It rattled in my chest, but it filled my lungs. I am not a loser. I am Nancy Wentworth, and I have everything on tape. I stood up. I was unsteady, but I was standing. I wasn't just a mother-in-law anymore. I was a woman with a weapon, and they had no idea I was holding it. If you drove past our house on Maplewood Drive, you would think we had it all. It is a big colonial-style home with white pillars and black shutters. The lawn is always green, cut diagonally just the way Tom likes it. There is a wreath on the door for every season, pastels for Easter, red and gold for Christmas, burnt orange for autumn. To the outside world, the Wentworths are the picture of the American dream. I am the matriarch, the grandmother living comfortably with her successful son and his beautiful wife. We go to church on Sundays. We host the neighborhood 4th of July barbecue. Mrs. Gable, next door, always tells me how lucky I am. "Oh, Nancy," she says, leaning over the fence. "It must be such a joy to have your family so close. You're never lonely." I always smile and nod. Yes, I'm very blessed. That is the lie I have told for 5 years. The truth is, loneliness isn't about being alone. The worst kind of loneliness is sitting at a dinner table with 3 other people and realizing that if you stood up and walked away, no one would even look up from their plates. After the asthma attack, I retreated to my bedroom. I didn't tell Tom what happened when he got home from the golf club. I knew what he would say. He would say I was overreacting. He would ask if I had taken my maintenance medication. He would say, "Nancy, don't cause trouble. Kay has been under a lot of stress lately. Tom is a good man on paper. He provided for us. He never raised a hand to me. But somewhere along the line, he decided that a peaceful life was more important than an honest one. He cares deeply about appearances. He wants the neighbors to envy us. He wants the guys at the club to think he's the patriarch of a dynasty. That is actually why the cameras are there. Tom installed them 6 months ago because someone 2 streets over had a package stolen from their porch. Tom went overboard. As usual, he put cameras in the hallway, the kitchen, the living room, and the driveway. He said, "I have to protect my property." It is ironic, isn't it? He wanted to protect his property, his TVs, his golf clubs, his car. He never thought he would need to protect his wife from his daughter-in-law. Kay hated them at first. She threw a fit. She said it was creepy. But Tom, in his passive way, just ignored her until she stopped complaining. He never checks the footage. He doesn't even know the password to the cloud account. But I do. I wrote it down in my address book under C for camera, right between the cable company and the chiropractor. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my hands. They are old hands now, spotted with age, veins visible under thin skin. But they are strong hands. These hands changed Roy's diapers. They bandaged his skinned knees. They cooked thousands of meals. They scrubbed floors and ironed shirts. And now these hands are invisible. Living with Roy and Kay was supposed to be a partnership. When Tom retired, we thought it made sense to combine households. We had the space. Roy and Kay were saving for a bigger place. It was supposed to be temporary, or at least mutually beneficial. It started slowly. A comment here, a sigh there. "Nancy, could you not leave your magazines on the coffee table? It looks cluttered," Kay would say. So I moved my magazines to my room. "Mom, don't cook the pot roast tonight. Kay wants sushi," Roy would say. So I put the roast back in the freezer and ate the sushi, even though the salt made my ankles swell. Then it became expectations. I became the unpaid maid. I would wake up to a sink full of dishes from their late-night snacks. Wine glasses with lipstick stains, plates with crusty cheese. They never rinsed them. They just left them, knowing that when they came home from work, the sink would be empty and shining. I did it. I did it because I wanted to be helpful. I did it because I wanted them to like me. But the more I did, the less they saw me. I became a ghost in my own house. I would walk into a room and the conversation would stop. Not because they were hiding secrets, but because they just didn't think I was worth talking to. I would ask Roy about his day, and he would give me one-word answers without looking away from the TV. Fine. Good. Busy. He wasn't always like this. That is the pain that sits in my chest, heavier than the asthma. Roy used to be my sweet boy. He was the one who would bring me dandelions from the yard. He was the one who called me every Sunday when he was in college. We used to laugh. We had inside jokes. But when he met Kay, he changed. It wasn't instant. It was a slow erosion. She has a way of looking at people, a way of making you feel like you are wearing the wrong clothes or saying the stupidest thing. Roy didn't want to look stupid, so he started mimicking her. He started rolling his eyes when I told a story. He started correcting my grammar. He started treating me like an embarrassingly outdated piece of furniture that he couldn't get rid of. They treat me like a burden. I hear them whispering when they think I'm asleep. Did you hear her coughing last night? It kept me up. Kay would complain. I know, babe. I'll talk to her. Roy would soothe her. Talk to me? As if my health was a behavioral issue. As if I was coughing on purpose to annoy them. And that's what led to today. The gasp, loser moment wasn't an accident. It was the climax of 5 years of dehumanization. Kay didn't see a human being on the floor. She saw an inconvenience. She saw an old appliance that was malfunctioning. I stood up from the bed and walked to the mirror. I looked at myself. I saw a woman with gray hair and tired eyes. But I also saw the woman who had survived breast cancer 10 years ago. I saw the woman who had raised a son. I saw the woman who had managed the household finances for 40 years. I was not a ghost. I was flesh and blood. And I was done being invisible. I could hear them downstairs now. The TV was on. I heard the clink of silverware. They were eating dinner. They hadn't called me down. They hadn't come to check on me. They were probably eating the casserole I had prepped yesterday. A coldness settled over me. It wasn't the coldness of fear, but the coldness of clarity. For years, I had tried to win them over with kindness. I thought if I was just nicer, quieter, more helpful, they would love me again. I thought if I made myself smaller, I would fit into their lives. But you cannot make someone love you by disappearing. You only make it easier for them to erase you. I walked to my bedroom door and locked it. It was a small click, but it sounded like a cannon shot in the quiet room. I went to my desk and opened the bottom drawer. I pulled out my address book. I turned to see camera, admin, password, Maple Leaf 1980. I sat down at my computer. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I knew that once I did this, there was no going back. Once I saw that footage, once I saved it, I was declaring war. Not a loud war with screaming and throwing plates. A silent war. The kind of war women like me have fought for generations. I typed in the password. The screen flickered, and then a grid of camera feeds appeared. Live views of the dark driveway, the empty hallway, the kitchen where Roy and Kay sat eating. I clicked on the Library/Archives tab. I scrolled back to 3 p.m. today, and there it was. I pressed play. I watched myself fall. I watched the struggle. I watched Kay's face. Seeing it on a screen was different than living it. When you are living it, you are in shock. But watching it made me see the malice. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a joke. It was cruelty, pure and simple. And Roy, watching Roy turn his back was harder than watching Kay smile. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and angry. I wiped it away quickly. I didn't have time for tears. I reached into my desk drawer and found a USB drive. It was an old one, something I used to save knitting patterns on. I plugged it in. I right-clicked on the video file. Download. The progress bar moved slowly. 10%, 40%, 80%. I held my breath until it hit 100%. I ejected the drive and held it in my palm. It was so light, just a tiny stick of plastic, but it held the weight of my entire future. I put the USB drive in my jewelry box, underneath a velvet lining beneath my grandmother's pearls. No one ever looked there. Then I went back to the computer. I found the activity log. I selected the entry for my login. Delete. I cleared the browser history. I turned off the monitor. The room was dark again, save for the moonlight filtering through the blinds. I wasn't the invisible matriarch anymore. I was the woman holding the match. And they had no idea they were standing in a house soaked in gasoline. I unlocked my bedroom door and went to sleep. For the first time in years, I slept soundly. I didn't cough once. The house is different when you know the people living in it want you gone. For 3 days after the attack, I moved through the rooms like a guest in a hotel. I was polite. I said good morning. I washed my own teacup, but I didn't engage. Roy and Kay thought I was sulking. I could see it in the way they rolled their eyes at each other when I walked into the kitchen. They thought I was playing the victim, trying to guilt them into an apology. They didn't understand that I wasn't looking for an apology anymore. I was looking for ammunition. Wednesday morning, they both left for work early. I waited by the window until Roy's sedan and Kay's SUV disappeared around the bend of Maplewood Drive. The moment the house was silent, I didn't go back to bed. I didn't turn on the television. I went straight to my room and locked the door. I pulled the jewelry box out from under the bed, lifted the velvet lining, and took out the USB drive. It was so small, no bigger than my thumb, yet it felt heavy in my hand. I sat at my desk and plugged it into my laptop. I hadn't watched it since the night I downloaded it. I had been too afraid that I might have imagined the cruelty. Maybe Kay hadn't really sneered. Maybe Roy hadn't really seen me. Memory is a tricky thing when you are suffocating. Oxygen deprivation can play tricks on the mind. I needed to be sure. I clicked the file. The video opened. The quality was startlingly clear. For K resolution, Tom had bragged. I saw myself stumble into the frame. I looked so frail. It is a terrible thing to see yourself weak. I saw my hand clawing at the rug. Then Kay entered the shot. I paused the video. I zoomed in. Her face wasn't panicked. It wasn't even concerned. It was annoyed. She looked at me the way one looks at a dog that has had an accident on the carpet. I pressed play. Gasp, loser. The microphone on the camera was sensitive. It picked up the whisper clearly. It wasn't a hallucination. She had said it. She had called me a loser while I fought for air. Then came the part one was dreading. I watched Roy walk in. I watched him look at me. I paused the video again, right on his face. This was the image that broke the last thread of attachment I had to my son. In high definition, there was no ambiguity. He didn't look confused. He looked trapped. He looked at me. Then he looked at Kay. And in that split second, I saw the calculation in his eyes. He weighed the cost of helping me against the cost of fighting with her. And he chose her. He chose the soda. I closed the laptop. I didn't cry. I think I had run out of tears. Instead, I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. It was a feeling I hadn't felt in years. It was power. I knew something they didn't know. I knew who they really were. I ejected the drive and hid it in a new spot, taped inside the hollow curtain rod of my bedroom window. They would never look there. Then, I went back to the computer. I logged into the security cloud one last time, just to be safe. I checked the access logs. Clean. I checked the recycling bin. Empty. I was invisible to them. And that was going to be my greatest strength. I went downstairs. Usually by this time of day, I would have started prepping dinner. I would be chopping vegetables for Roy's favorite stew or marinating chicken for Kay's salad. I would be dusting the living room, making sure the throw pillows were fluffed exactly how Kay liked them. I stood in the center of the kitchen. No, I said aloud to the empty room. I walked out of the kitchen. I went to the sunroom, sat in my favorite armchair, and opened a book. When Roy and Kay came home at 6 p.m., the house smelled neutral. No garlic roasting, no onion sautéing, just air. I heard the front door open. "Mom." Roy called out. "What smells? Nothing." He walked into the sunroom, loosening his tie. Kay was right behind him, looking tired and irritable. "Where's dinner?" Kay asked, dropping her purse on the sofa. "I'm starving." In the past, I would have jumped up. I would have apologized. "Oh, I'm so sorry. Time got away from me. Let me whip something up." I didn't move from my chair. I didn't even look up from my book. "I didn't cook," I said calmly. There was a silence, a stunned, heavy silence. "You didn't cook?" Kay repeated, as if I had spoken in a foreign language. "Why? Are you sick?" "No," I said, turning a page. "I just didn't feel like it." Roy blinked. "Okay, well, what are we supposed to eat?" I looked at him then. I looked at the man who had left me on the rug. "There is peanut butter in the pantry," I said, "and bread." Kay let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "You're kidding, right? Nancy, we work all day. The least you can do is have a meal ready." "The least I can do," I repeated slowly. I closed my book and met her eyes. For a second, I thought about screaming. I thought about telling her I had the video. I thought about shouting, "I saw you," but I stopped myself. That was what the old Nancy would do. The emotional, dramatic Nancy. The new Nancy was silent. The new Nancy was patient. "I'm retired, Kay," I said, offering a small, tight smile. "I think I'm going to start enjoying my free time. You're a capable woman. I'm sure you can manage a sandwich." I stood up and walked past them. I could feel their shock radiating off them like heat. They were waiting for me to crack. They were waiting for me to beg for their forgiveness. I walked up the stairs, my head high. "Is she serious?" I heard Kay hiss to Roy. "What is wrong with her?" "I don't know," Roy whispered back. "She's acting weird." I went into my room and closed the door. My heart was pounding, but it was a good pounding. It was the rhythm of adrenaline. I sat on my bed and looked at the curtain rod where the USB drive was hidden. Let them eat peanut butter. Let them be confused. I wasn't their maid anymore. I wasn't their victim anymore. I was a witness, and I was just waiting for the right time to take the stand. Little did I know, the opportunity would come sooner than I expected. A knock on the door the very next week would change everything. The subpoena was coming, and this time I wouldn't be the one on trial. 2 months had passed since the day I downloaded that video. 2 months of what I call the Cold War in the Wentworth household. I didn't move out. I didn't scream. I simply stopped being useful. I stopped doing their laundry. I stopped buying their groceries. When the dishwasher was full, I washed only my own plate and fork by hand, leaving their mess exactly where they left it. It drove Kay crazy. She is a woman who needs control, and for the first time, she couldn't control me. She tried to pick fights. She would stomp around the kitchen, sighing loudly about the filth in the sink. She would make passive-aggressive comments about how some people have nothing to do all day, but still can't help out. I just ignored her. I would sip my tea, look out the window at the bird feeder, and pretend I was deaf. It turns out selective hearing is a wonderful superpower. They thought I was losing my mind. I heard them whispering about it. She's slipping, Roy, Kay would say. She forgets to cook. She stares into space. She's getting senile. They didn't know I wasn't staring into space. I was staring at the curtain rod where the USB drive was hidden. I was biding my time. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon, time ran out. There was a knock at the door. It wasn't the Amazon delivery driver. It was a man in a rumpled gray suit holding a thick envelope. Nancy Wentworth, he asked. Yes. You've been served. He thrust the envelope into my hand and walked away before I could even ask a question. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Legal documents always look terrifying, even when you haven't done anything wrong. I scanned the cover page. Superior Court of Colorado. Plaintiff, Kayla Wentworth. Defendant, Sarah Miller. It was a subpoena. I was being ordered to appear in court as a witness. My heart started to race. Why was I involved in this? Who was Sarah Miller? I didn't have to wait long to find out. Kay came home an hour later, her heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood floor. She saw the papers on the kitchen table. She didn't look surprised. She looked smug. Oh, good, she said, tossing her keys on the counter. It arrived. Kay, what is this? I asked, pointing to the document. Why am I being summoned to court? She walked over to the fridge and grabbed a bottle of sparkling water. She looked calm, almost happy. It's nothing to worry about, Nancy. I'm suing Sarah. You remember Sarah? My old assistant. I vaguely remembered a quiet girl with glasses who had come to the house once for a Christmas party. She had seemed nice. She's been spreading lies about me, Kay said, taking a sip. She went on social media and posted this long, pathetic rant. She called me a manipulative bully. She said I created a toxic work environment. Can you believe that? Me? A bully? She laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound. I'm suing her for defamation. My lawyer says we have a slam dunk case. We're going to destroy her. She'll never work in this town again. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had held my inhaler out of reach and called me a loser. A bully? Sarah Miller had no idea just how right she was. But why do you need me? I asked. I don't know Sarah. I don't know what happened at your office. Kay set her water down and walked over to me. Her face changed. The sharpness vanished. Her eyes softened. Her lips curved into a gentle smile. It was a transformation, so sudden it was almost scary. She sat down in the chair next to me and reached out to cover my hand with hers. Her skin was cold. Mom, she said. She never called me Mom. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, says we need a character witness. We need someone to show the jury the real me. Sarah is painting me as this monster who terrorizes people. We need to prove her wrong. She squeezed my hand. Who knows me better than you? She continued. We live together. We're family. If my own mother-in-law stands up and tells the judge what a loving, caring person I am, well, Sarah's lies will fall apart. If I take such good care of my elderly mother-in-law, how could I be a bully? I felt a chill run down my spine. It was a trap. She was using me. She was using my age, my gray hair, my frailty as a prop. She wanted to wheel me into court like a sweet, confused old grandma to validate her mask. She wanted me to lie for her. You just have to answer a few questions, Kay said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Just tell them how I help you around the house. Tell them how we're a happy family. Tell them I'm a good person. Roy walked in then. He must have been listening from the hallway. It's really important, Mom, he said, loosening his tie. He didn't look me in the eye. He looked at the floor. If Kay loses this, it could hurt her career. We could lose a lot of money. We really need you to do this. I looked at Roy. My son. He was asking me to perjure myself to protect the woman who abused me. He was asking me to save the reputation of the monster in our house. For a moment, I wanted to spit in their faces. I wanted to scream. She tried to kill me. But then, I remembered the video. I realized something. They were handing me the microphone. They were putting me on a stage. They were inviting me to tell the world who Kay really was. If I refused, they would just find someone else. Or they would pressure me until I broke. But if I agreed, I would get access to the courtroom. I would get access to the judge. I looked at Kay. She was still smiling that fake, sugary smile, waiting for the senile old lady to nod her head. She thought I was weak. She thought I was desperate for her approval. She thought she had me wrapped around her little finger. I took a deep breath. I let my shoulders slump a little. I made my voice sound small and tired. "Oh, I see," I said. "You want me to tell the judge how you treat me?" "Exactly." Kay beamed. "Just tell them the truth about our relationship." "The truth," I repeated. "Yes. Just say we're close. Say I take care of you." I pulled my hand away from hers, slowly, so it wouldn't look suspicious. I folded my hands in my lap. "Of course, dear," I said. "I would be happy to testify. I will tell them exactly what happened." Kate clapped her hands together. "Oh, thank you, Nancy. This is going to be great. Mr. Henderson will be so pleased. We're going to win this." She stood up and kissed me on the forehead. It felt like a brand. "I'm going to order pizza to celebrate," she said, pulling out her phone. "Pepperoni, your favorite." "I hate pepperoni." I have told her that for 5 years. "That sounds lovely," I said. Roy let out a sigh of relief. "Thanks, Mom. You're a lifesaver." I watched them bustle around the kitchen, happy and confident. They were already celebrating their victory. They thought they had just secured their star witness. They didn't know they had just handed the executioner an axe. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the street where the process server had parked. "I'll tell them exactly what happened," I whispered to the glass. I wasn't lying. I was going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I went upstairs to prepare. I had a phone call to make, not to Kay's lawyer, but to the number listed on the subpoena for the defense, Sarah Miller's lawyer. The trap was set, but Kay was the one walking into it. The week leading up to the trial was the longest masquerade ball of my life. Suddenly, I wasn't the burden or the invisible woman anymore. I was the star of the show, and Roy and Kay were my desperate directors. They sat me down at the dining room table every night after dinner. Kay would clear away the dishes, something she hadn't done in years, and pour me a cup of herbal tea. She would smile, that tight, practiced smile she used for photos, and lay her hands on the table. "Okay, Nancy," she would say, her voice sugary sweet. "Let's practice again. What will you say if the lawyer asks about my temper?" I would sip my tea, looking at her over the rim of the cup. "I will say you are passionate." "Passionate. Good." Kay nodded, checking a note on her phone. "And if they ask about the atmosphere in the house?" "I will say it is peaceful and loving." I recited. "Perfect." Roy would chime in from the living room. "You're doing great, Mom." It was humiliating. They treated me like a toddler preparing for a preschool pageant. They fed me lines, rewriting our history right in front of my face. They wanted me to paint a picture of a home filled with laughter and care. They wanted me to erase the neglect, the insults, and the silence. I played along. I nodded. I smiled. I pretended to struggle with the words, sometimes, just so they would feel important correcting me. "No, Nancy, not quiet." Kay would correct gently. "Say serene." "It sounds better." "Serene," I repeated. "Of course, dear." Inside, I was screaming. Every time I looked at Roy, I saw him turning his back on me in the kitchen. Every time Kay touched my shoulder to encourage me, I felt the phantom sensation of my airways closing up. They were coaching me to save them, completely unaware that I was memorizing their lies to destroy them. They thought they were writing the script. They didn't know I had already written the ending. But I had one loose end to tie up. The video. I couldn't just walk into court with a USB drive in my pocket and wave it at the judge. I watched enough legal dramas to know that evidence has to be submitted properly. I needed Sarah Miller's lawyer to have it. I needed him to know what was coming so he could spring the trap. On Thursday, 2 days before the trial, I told Kay I had a hair appointment. I want to look nice for the judge, I said. I need a trim and a set. Kay didn't suspect a thing. In fact, she looked relieved. That's a great idea, Nancy. You want to make a good impression. Here, take my credit card. She handed me the card she usually forbade me from touching. It felt like blood money. I drove my old sedan to the strip mall where my hairdresser, Linda, worked. I did get my hair done. I needed the alibi to be solid, but the moment I was out of the chair, smelling of hairspray and lavender, I didn't go home. I drove 3 towns over to a small diner off the highway. I sat in a booth in the back, clutching my purse. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I felt like a spy in a Cold War movie. I kept checking the door, terrified Roy would walk in, even though he was at work 30 miles away. 10 minutes later, a man walked in. He was young, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a kind face. It was the lawyer for the defense, the man representing Sarah Miller. I had called his office from a payphone at the grocery store. Yes, they still exist if you look hard enough, and left a message saying I had critical information regarding the Wentworth case. He slid into the booth opposite me. He looked confused. He expected a witness for the plaintiff, not a defector. Mrs. Wentworth, he asked softly. Mr. Davis. I nodded. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. My daughter-in-law, Kay, thinks I am going to testify that she is a saint. He leaned back, crossing his arms. And are you? I'm going to testify, I said, but not to that. I reached into my purse. My hand brushed past the tissue packet and the mints until I felt the cool plastic of the USB drive. I pulled it out and placed it on the Formica table between us. What is this? He asked. This is the truth, I said. 2 months ago, I had an asthma attack. Kay didn't help me. She taunted me. And Roy. Roy did nothing. Mr. Davis's eyes widened. He looked from the drive to me. You have proof. It is all on there. Security footage. Clear audio. You will hear her call me a loser while I gasp for air. He picked up the drive carefully, as if it were a diamond. Does she know you have this? No, I said. She thinks I am a confused old woman who is happy to do as she is told. She thinks I am on her side. A slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't a shark smile like Kay's. It was a smile of justice. Mrs. Wentworth, he said, tucking the drive into his pocket. You just won this case, but you have to go through with it. You have to take the stand and let her lawyer question you first. We need her to commit to the lie before we expose it. I know, I said. I am ready. I drove home, feeling lighter than air. When I walked through the door, Kay was in the kitchen. Your hair looks nice, Nancy, she said, barely looking up from her salad. Did you remember the lines for tomorrow? Yes, I lied effortlessly. I remember everything. That night, the night before the trial, the house was eerily quiet. Roy was pacing in the living room, rehearsing his own testimony. Kay was in the bedroom, picking out her outfit. She wanted to look professional but approachable. I laid out my clothes on my bed, my best Sunday suit, navy blue with a cream blouse. I polished my sensible black heels. I took out my pearl necklace, the one my mother gave me. I looked at my reflection in the vanity mirror. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a woman who was done being pushed around. I thought about all the times I had swallowed my pride, the times I had eaten peanut butter while they ordered takeout, the times I had cleaned up their messes, the gasp loser that still echoed in my ears every time I used my inhaler. Tomorrow, the silence would end. I climbed into bed, but I didn't sleep much. I lay there staring at the ceiling, rehearsing my own lines. Not the ones they gave me, the real ones. Morning came with a gray, steel-colored sky. The air was crisp. We ate breakfast in silence. Roy looked nauseous. Kay looked focused, like a predator spotting prey. "Remember, Nancy," Kay whispered as we headed to the car. "Stick to the script. Don't improvise. Just answer the questions exactly how we practiced." "I will answer the questions," I said. She didn't catch the difference. I sat in the back seat of Roy's car as we drove to the courthouse. I watched the familiar streets pass by. I said a silent goodbye to the grocery store where I shopped, the park where I used to walk, the life I had known for the past 5 years. I knew that after today, I could never go back to that house. I was burning the bridge, and I was standing on it with a match. "We're here," Roy said, his voice tight. The courthouse loomed ahead, tall and imposing. I smoothed my skirt. I clutched my purse. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the air I had fought so hard to keep. I was terrified. My hands were shaking in my lap. But beneath the fear, there was a fire. Kay opened the car door for me, offering her hand to help me out. A show for the people walking by. "Ready, Mom?" she asked. I took her hand. It was cold. Mine was warm. "Yes, Kay," I said, stepping onto the pavement. I have never been more ready in my life. We walked up the steps together. The masquerade was about to end, and the unmasking was going to be spectacular. The courtroom in Denver smelled like lemonwood polish and stale coffee. It was a cold, sterile room with high ceilings and rows of hard wooden benches that made your back ache after 10 minutes. I sat in the front row behind the plaintiff's table, right next to Roy. He was bouncing his leg up and down, a nervous habit he had kept since he was a teenager. He kept checking his watch, then checking his phone, then checking the door. He wouldn't look at me. Kay sat at the table next to her lawyer, Mr. Henderson. She was wearing a soft, powder blue cardigan over a modest white dress. She had pulled her hair back into a low bun. She looked vulnerable. She looked sweet. She looked nothing like the woman who had stood over me while I suffocated. The trial moved quickly. It was a civil case, so there was no jury of 12 angry men, just a panel of jurors who looked like they would rather be anywhere else. Sarah Miller, the defendant, sat on the other side. She looked terrified. She was young, maybe 30, with dark circles under her eyes. She knew she was up against a wealthy, polished opponent. She didn't know she had a secret weapon sitting in the front row of the opposition's bench. Kay took the stand first. I have to give her credit. She put on a masterclass performance. When Mr. Henderson asked her about the attacks on her character, her voice trembled just enough to sound brave, but broken. "I tried to be a mentor to Sarah," Kay said, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. "I tried to help her, but when I had to correct her work, she became hostile. She started spreading these awful rumors that I was a bully. It hurt my professional reputation, but mostly it just broke my heart." She looked at the jury. She offered them a sad, wobbly smile. I saw a few of the jurors nod sympathetically. They bought it. They saw a successful, well-dressed woman being torn down by a jealous former employee. "And how has this affected your home life?" Mr. Henderson asked softly. It's been so hard, Kay whispered. My family means everything to me. I go home to my husband and his wonderful mother, and I try to be strong for them. But the stress, it's been overwhelming. I felt bile rise in my throat. Wonderful mother. The audacity of it made me grip my purse tighter. She was using me as a prop in her tragedy. Roy reached over and patted my knee. She's doing great, he whispered to me. She certainly is, I replied. When Kay finished, she stepped down with the grace of a swan. She walked back to the table, and as she passed me, she gave me a quick, sharp nod. It was a command. You're next. Don't mess this up. The plaintiff calls Nancy Wentworth to the stand. Mr. Henderson announced. The bailiff stood up. Nancy Wentworth. I stood up. My knees popped. I walked through the little gate that separates the spectators from the participants. The floor was carpeted, muffling my footsteps. I could feel every eye in the room on me. I climbed the 2 steps to the witness stand and sat in the leather chair. It was still warm from Kay. The bailiff held out a Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I placed my hand on the leather cover. It felt cool and solid. I do, I said, and I meant it more than anyone in that room realized. Mr. Henderson approached the stand. He was a tall man with a booming voice and a smile that showed too many teeth. He thought this was going to be easy. He thought I was the victory lap. Mrs. Wentworth, he began, leaning against the railing casually. You are the mother-in-law of the plaintiff, Kay Wentworth. Is that correct? Yes, that is correct. And you live with Kay and your son, Roy? Yes, for the past 5 years. Wonderful, he smiled. Now, we have heard allegations from the defendant that Kay is a manipulative bully who abuses her power. As someone who lives with her, who sees her every day behind closed doors, how would you describe your relationship with her? This was it. The script. This was where I was supposed to say, she is like a daughter to me. This was where I was supposed to say, our home is a sanctuary. I looked at Kay. She was leaning forward slightly, her eyes wide and encouraging. She looked so confident. She thought she owned me. I looked at Roy. He was staring at his shoes. Then I looked at the jury. I saw a woman in the back row about my age. She had kind eyes. I took a breath. You want to know about my relationship with Kay? I asked. Yes, Mrs. Wentworth. Please tell the court. I folded my hands in my lap. I kept my voice steady. I would describe my relationship with Kay as educational. Mr. Henderson blinked. That wasn't in the script. Educational. In what way? She has taught me a lot about survival. I said. The air in the room shifted. It was subtle, but I felt it. Mr. Henderson's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. I'm not sure I follow. He chuckled nervously. Let's be specific. Does Kay take care of you? Is she a loving family member? Kay is very attentive. I said, she pays close attention to everything, especially when I am weak. Kay's smile disappeared. She sat up straighter. Mrs. Wentworth, Mr. Henderson said, his voice a little sharper now. Let's cut to the chase. How would you describe Kay's character to this jury? Is she a good person? I looked directly at Kay. I locked eyes with her. I let her see the fire I had been hiding for 2 months. Kay is a very good actress. I said clearly. A ripple of murmurs went through the courtroom, but I continued, raising my voice just enough to cut through the noise. She is not a good person. Mr. Henderson froze. Objection. Witness is non-responsive. I am responding directly to your question. I said, you asked about her character. Mrs. Wentworth, the judge warned gently. Please explain your statement. I turned to the judge. Your Honor, 2 months ago, I suffered a severe asthma attack in my living room. I collapsed on the floor. I could not breathe. My inhaler was on the coffee table. The room went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Kay was there. I continued. She picked up the inhaler. I begged her for it. I was dying. My lips were turning blue. Objection! Mr. Henderson shouted. Relevance! Overruled, the judge said, leaning forward. Go on, Mrs. Wentworth. She didn't give it to me, I said. My voice didn't shake. She held it over my head. She watched me crawl on the rug. She smiled at me. I looked back at the jury. They were staring at me, with their mouths open. The woman in the back row had her hand over her heart. And then, I said, she whispered something to me. She said, "Gasp, loser." Gasps erupted in the courtroom, real ones this time. She called me a loser while she watched me suffocate. I said, and my son, Roy, he was there too. He saw it happening, and he walked into the kitchen to get a soda because he was too afraid of his wife to help his own mother. Liar! Kay shrieked. She jumped up from her seat, knocking her chair over. The mask was gone. The sweet victim had vanished, replaced by the predator I knew so well. Her face was twisted in ugly, red rage. She's senile. Kay screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. She's lying. She's crazy. None of that happened. Roy grabbed her arm, trying to pull her down. Kay, stop. Sit down. She's trying to ruin me. Kay yelled. Mr. Henderson looked like he wanted to vanish into the floor. He hadn't vetted his witness. He had trusted a narcissist. And now his case was imploding. Order! The judge banged his gavel. Order in this court. Counsel, control your client. I am telling the truth, I said calmly into the microphone. And I am not the only one who saw it. I looked toward the defense table. Sarah Miller's lawyer, Mr. Davis, was already standing up. He had his hand in his pocket. He looked at me and nodded. Your Honor, Mr. Davis said, his voice cutting through the chaos. The defense has evidence to corroborate Mrs. Wentworth's testimony. We have video surveillance footage from inside the home on the day in question. Kay stopped screaming. She froze. Her eyes went wide. She looked at Roy. Video, she whispered. What video? Roy looked at me. His face was pale, the color of old dough. He realized in that moment what the red blinking light on the bookshelf had been doing all along. We have copies for the court, Mr. Davis said, walking toward the bench with the USB drive I had given him in the diner. The judge took the drive. He looked at Kay, then at me. We will take a 15-minute recess to review this evidence, the judge said. Everyone remained seated. I sat back in the witness chair. My hands were folded. My heart was steady. I watched Kay sink back into her chair. She looked small. She looked trapped. She looked like a loser. The courtroom buzzed with energy, the kind of electricity you feel before a thunderstorm breaks. But I wasn't afraid of the storm anymore. I was the one who had brought the lightning. The 15-minute recess felt like a lifetime. The court reporter typed something, stopped, and sipped water. The bailiff stood by the door, arms crossed, looking at the ceiling. I didn't look at Roy or Kay. I kept my eyes forward, staring at the wood grain of the witness stand. I could hear them whispering furiously behind me at the plaintiff's table. You said she was senile. Kay hissed. You said she would do whatever we told her. Keep your voice down, Mr. Henderson snapped back. He sounded sweaty. He sounded like a man realizing his career was about to take a very ugly turn. When the judge returned, the room went stiff. Judge Reynolds was a man in his 60s with reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He didn't look at the lawyers. He looked at me. Then he looked at Kay. His expression was unreadable, but his jaw was set tight. I have reviewed the digital evidence submitted by the defense, Judge Reynolds said. His voice was calm, but it had a hard edge to it. I am admitting it into evidence as Exhibit A. Mr. Henderson jumped up. He was desperate now. "Objection, Your Honor," he shouted. "We cannot verify the authenticity of this video. Mrs. Wentworth is an elderly woman with a history of confusion. She could have been manipulated into tampering with this file. She is clearly not in her right mind." I sat there perfectly still, senile, confused, not in her right mind. These were the labels they used to dismiss me for years. The judge looked over his glasses at Mr. Henderson. "Counsel, are you suggesting your client's mother-in-law learned how to use deepfake technology to forge a security video in the last 48 hours? "I am saying she is unreliable." Henderson stammered. "She doesn't know what she's doing." "She seems perfectly lucid to me," the judge said coldly. "Overruled. Play the video." The bailiff dimmed the lights. A large monitor on the wall to my left flickered to life. The courtroom fell into a silence, so deep you could hear a pin drop. Then the sound began. It wasn't a voice. It was a wheeze. Hoo, hoo. The sound of my own suffocation filled the room. It was loud. It was wet. It was the sound of a human being drowning in the air. I saw the jurors flinch. The woman in the back row covered her mouth with her hand. They weren't just hearing it. They were feeling it. On the screen, my living room appeared in crisp, high definition. There I was on the floor, my legs kicking weakly, my hand reaching up. And there was Kay. On the giant screen, she looked 10 feet tall. Her tennis outfit was pristine. Her face was bored. "Please," the video Nancy tried to say. The real me sat in the witness chair, watching the jury watch Kay. I saw their faces change. Confusion turned to shock. Shock turned to disgust. On the screen, Kay pulled the inhaler back. She examined her fingernails. "You're making so much noise, Nancy," the video Kay said. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. It was involuntary. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. Then Roy walked into the frame. I heard a sob from the table behind me. It was Roy. He was watching himself on screen, looking at his dying mother, and turning away. "I'm going to grab a soda," the video Roy mumbled. In the courtroom, Roy put his head in his hands. He hunched over, trying to make himself small. He wanted to disappear, but he couldn't. His shame was being broadcast in 4K resolution. The video continued. Kay leaned down. Her face filled the screen. Her lips moved. The microphone picked up the whisper perfectly. "Gasp, loser." The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. "Gasp, loser." The video ended. The screen went black. The lights came back up. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then, the judge turned his chair to face Kay. The look on his face wasn't judicial neutrality anymore. It was pure human revulsion. "Mrs. Wentworth," the judge said. Kay stood up. She was trembling. Her face was pale, stripped of all its makeup and pretense. She looked around the room, searching for an ally. She looked at the jury, but they were glaring at her with open hostility. One juror, a man with gray hair, was shaking his head in disbelief. It's out of context." Kay screamed. Her voice cracked, high and hysterical. "We were joking. It was a joke. She and I have a dark sense of humor. You don't understand our relationship." "A joke," the judge repeated. "You withheld life-saving medication from a woman in distress. Is that your idea of a punchline? She wasn't really dying." Kay yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She's dramatic. She does it for attention. Look at her. She's sitting right there. She's fine. She set me up." She was unraveling. The cool, collected executive was gone. In her place was a cornered animal lashing out at everyone. "Sit down, Mrs. Wentworth," her lawyer hissed, trying to pull her by the elbow. "No, don't touch me." Kay slapped his hand away. You're supposed to be fixing this. They're twisting everything. Roy, tell them. Tell them your mother is crazy. She turned to Roy. Roy was still burying his face in his hands. He was crying, not the polite, silent tears of a funeral, but the ugly, heaving sobs of a man who realizes he has sold his soul for nothing. Roy. Kay shrieked. Defend me. Roy slowly lifted his head. His eyes were red and swollen. He looked at Kay, and for the first time in 5 years, he didn't look at her with adoration or fear. He looked at her with horror. I saw you, Roy whispered. His voice was weak, but in the quiet room, everyone heard it. What? Kay froze. I saw you, Roy said louder. He stood up. I saw you holding the inhaler. I don't know what I thought. I tried to ignore it, but watching it now, you enjoyed it. You enjoyed hurting her. Roy, shut up. Kay lunged toward him, but the bailiff stepped in, blocking her path. That is enough. Judge Reynolds slammed his gavel down. The sound echoed like a gunshot. One more outburst, Mrs. Wentworth, and I will hold you in contempt of court. Sit down. Now. Kay collapsed into her chair. She looked small. She looked defeated. The perfect family she had spent years curating, the manicured lawn, the expensive dinners, the social standing, had just shattered into 1,000,000 pieces on the floor of a public courtroom. I looked at Sarah Miller, the defendant. She was crying, too, but they were tears of relief. She looked at me and mouthed, "Thank you." I nodded to her. Then I looked at the judge. Mrs. Wentworth, the judge said to me. His voice was soft again, respectful. You may step down. I stood up. I didn't feel old. I didn't feel frail. I felt tall. As I walked back to my seat, I had to pass Kay. She wouldn't look at me. She was staring at the table, picking at a loose thread on her cardigan. She was already shrinking. She was becoming the ghost now. I sat down. I smoothed my skirt. The masquerade was over. The lights were on. And everyone finally saw the monsters for who they really were. Judge Reynolds didn't waste any time. He looked at Kay, who was slumped in her chair, and then at her lawyer, who was busy stuffing papers into his briefcase as if he wanted to flee the building. Mrs. Wentworth, the judge said, his voice echoing in the silent room. In 30 years on the bench, I have seen some truly shameful behavior. But what I saw on that screen today stands in a category of its own. Kay opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to offer another excuse, but the judge held up a hand. Do not speak, he commanded. This defamation suit is dismissed immediately with prejudice. That means you can never file it again. Furthermore, I am awarding the defendant, Ms. Miller, all legal fees and court costs. Sarah Miller let out a shaky breath, clutching her lawyer's hand. However, the judge continued, leaning forward, my ruling does not end here. The video evidence presented today depicts what appears to be a criminal act of elder abuse and reckless endangerment. I am forwarding a copy of this footage to the district attorney's office with a strong recommendation that they investigate. Kay's face went gray. She wasn't just losing a lawsuit. She was facing jail time. Court is adjourned, the judge said, banging the gavel. The room erupted. Reporters who had been half asleep in the back row were now rushing toward the aisle. Sarah Miller ran over to me and hugged me. She didn't say anything. She just squeezed me tight. I hugged her back. We were two women who had survived the same bully. I walked out of the courtroom with my head held high. The heavy wooden doors swung open, and the bright fluorescent lights of the hallway hit me. Mom, wait. I knew that voice. I had listened to it for 40 years. I stopped and turned around. Roy was running after me. His tie was crooked, his eyes were red, and he looked like a lost little boy. Kay was nowhere to be seen. She was likely hiding in the bathroom or arguing with her lawyer. Roy stopped a few feet away from me. He reached out a hand, then pulled it back. "Mom," he choked out. I'm so sorry. I didn't know." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had raised. "You didn't know?" I asked quietly. "I didn't know it was that bad." He stammered. "I saw you on the floor, but I thought you were just having a regular attack. I didn't know she was holding the inhaler. I swear, Mom, if I had known she was hurting you, I would have stopped it." He was crying now, tears streaming down his face. He believed his own lie. He needed to believe it to live with himself. I took a step closer to him. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. "Roy," I said, "you were in the video." He froze. I watched it. I continued. "I watched you look at me. I watched you see my face turning blue. I watched you see your wife smiling. And you walked away to get a soda. Mom, please." "You knew," I said. "You might not have heard the words she whispered, but you knew I was in danger. And you decided that your comfort was more important than my life. You decided that keeping Kay happy was more important than keeping me alive." He hung his head. He had no answer for that. "I love you, Roy," I said. "You are my son. But I cannot have you in my life right now. I cannot look at you without seeing your back turn to me." What are you going to do?" he asked. "I am selling the house," I said. His head snapped up. "What? The house is in my name. Your father left it to me. I let you live there because I wanted a family, but that house is not a home anymore. I have already spoken to a realtor. You and Kay have 30 days to vacate." 30 days, he panicked. "But, Mom, Kay just lost her job. With this legal trouble, we can't get a mortgage. Where will we go?" "You are a capable man, Roy," I said, adjusting my purse strap. "I am sure you will figure it out, just like I figured out how to breathe on my own." I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I walked out of the courthouse and into the fresh air. For the first time in years, the air tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom. 3 months later, I am sitting on the balcony of my new condo. It is on the 4th floor, overlooking a park. It is smaller than the old house, but it is mine. There are no dark corners here. The walls are painted yellow. The sun pours in every morning. My health has improved dramatically. My doctor says my asthma was triggered by stress. Since moving out, I haven't used my emergency inhaler once. It turns out the biggest allergen in my life was my family. Kay was charged with reckless endangerment. She took a plea deal to avoid prison, probation, and mandatory anger management classes. She and Roy are living in a small apartment across town. I hear things are not going well for them. Without my money and my housekeeping, the cracks in their marriage are turning into canyons. But I don't spend much time thinking about them. I am too busy. I started a small nonprofit organization called The Open Window. We help seniors who are experiencing emotional abuse or neglect. We help them find resources, legal aid, and mostly we just listen. We help them find their voices. Yesterday, a woman came into our office. She was about my age, timid, looking at the floor. She told me her daughter was controlling her finances and making her feel worthless. I took her hand. I looked her in the eye. "You are not worthless," I told her, "and you are not alone." I saw a spark in her eyes. The same spark I felt when I saw that red blinking light on the bookshelf. I sipped my tea and watched the birds flying over the park. I am 70 years old, and my life is just beginning. I am not a ghost. I am not a burden. And I am certainly not a loser. I open my journal and pick up my pen. I write one final sentence for the day. I found my voice, and I'm never staying silent again. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks, so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story.